Welcome back, as always. Let's dive right into the largest level the Demon Souls has to offer. These depraved ones are a bit stronger than the ones we fought in the first area, but they still don't pose too much of a threat. Further ahead on the path is a dead end, so we have no choice but to turn back around and descend. This is why I decided to equip the Antidote Miracle. Not only do the enemies inflict poison, but also the entirety of the swamp that we have to wade through does as well. It slows us down and prevents any dodge rolling, making any enemies we encounter while going through it that much more of a challenge to deal with. These, Metroid-esque, maybe, enemies are pretty cool and unique to just this first part of the swamp, I'm pretty sure. You'll notice that I'm not veering off the beaten path too much here, and that's purely in the interest of time. The swamp is massive and doesn't block you off very much either, but the items you can find aren't that important to me. That's fine, I just want to get on solid, non-sludgy land. We will veer off to the side here, though, for a storied hero's soul. Might as well, considering how close it is. I'm not even going to bother with this giant depraved one and his little friends. Way too much of a hassle for way too little reward. The fog door shows us the way to the second half of the swamp. The big guy doesn't seem to want to leave us be, so we'll take the time to get rid of him. Unfortunately, there are a lot of these little mosquito enemies that shoot out poison blood at us too, but the big guy poses a lot more of a threat than they do. They can be very annoying to hit as well. I'm just going to stick to this little upwards path to progress through the level. Every time I play this game, I either fall off or get knocked off that path, and of course this time was no exception. I don't even really remember where it leads at this point because I'm so familiar with falling down to this half of the swamp. Our destination is still those lights off in the distance, but we'll have a slight detour once we reach them. some slugs, not unlike the ones in World 4, but these seem to be a lot less phosphorescent. Over here is a large pile of slugs, but if you look directly above it, you'll see a mound of them apparently suspended in the air. That is our detour. The shaman depraved ones cast Poison Cloud, which by itself isn't too special in attack since it's kind of just what it says on the tin. Something interesting about it though is that when they cast it, the sound effect of a woman's scream plays and it sounds as though it's coming from the cloud. This same sound clip was reused by From Software in Dark Souls, and it plays during an attack in the Gravelord Nito boss fight. As long as we're careful, we shouldn't have the same problem with this thin path as the last one where we fell off. There aren't very many enemies to speak of, but the path is really narrow. These strung-up slugs are housing an item that I simply have to talk about, so we're going to chop them down and add on to that pile of slugs that we saw at the bottom. Now all that's left to do is walk back down the path and get back to them. I'm not going to bother killing most of the slugs because that would just take too much time, but you can sort of see the items sticking out of the ground in the middle of all of them. There, that should be enough. We just acquired the large sword of Moonlight. It is the legendary large sword that reflects moonlight, widely known in association with Moonlight Knight Beto. It's one of the few revelations from God. The blue crystal blade is composed only of light, so it's impossible to block with a shield. This may just seem like a rather unique weapon in Demon Souls, but it's actually quite a bit more than that. The Moonlight sword originated in the game Kingsfield, which was the first game made by From Software in 1994 for the PS1. That game was followed by 3 sequels, with the most recent being Kingsfield 4 on the PS2. In each game, the Moonlight sword is either an endgame weapon, a plot device, or both, and considering that Demon Souls was created as a spiritual successor to Kingsfield, its inclusion is fantastic. In Demon Souls, this weapon scales with the Faith stat, whereas in all 3 Dark Souls games, it scales with Intelligence. It's probably for the best that it's not a magic weapon in this game, or else I would have obviously been forced to do World 5 first.
Won't you buy something? My poor child is sick. He needs your help. This place? It's a proper mound of rubbish. All the rot of the world, living or not, ends up here. I thank the stars that I still have my boy. Ever since that demon witch came here, everything has turned foul. This was a much better place before she came. I was the apple of every man's eye. You're here to rid us of her, aren't you? Well, don't show her any mercy. I thank the stars that I still have my boy. Finished already? You wretched penny pincher. Just let the children of the poor die, is that it?
With most of the swamp behind us, we've reached the source of the flames, a shanty town where the filthy woman has relocated. She must really know her way around. She curses the very arrival of the demon witch, but it appears to be for a rather personal reason. Hopefully we'll be able to see this witch for ourselves soon. Until then, though, we're going to get pushed around by some depraved ones as we make our way through their little settlement. Pushing can be very annoying. Into the darkness that way is our destination, but we'll take this semi-hidden path along the cliffside first. Mosquitoes suck. 1 second. That blood-sucking attack is disgusting. It doesn't do any damage, but the discomfort in watching it still takes its toll. This path takes up a pretty sizable distance. At the end of it is a legendary soldier's soul and a shortcut to the very beginning of the entire level. It's incredibly convenient, though the boss at the end of this area isn't particularly punishing. We're back at the shanty town, but we're going to make one final detour before finishing the level. This shaman depraved one, for whatever reason, drops an entire armor set. It's the same armor that Satsuki wears, wore, and it happens to be my favorite in the game, so I'll be wearing it for the rest of the playthrough. I'm always a fan of armor sets that include miscellaneous items like carrying bags or small pouches and stuff, which is why I like the starting cleric armor in Dark Souls so much as well. Dirty Colossus marks the second rather uninteresting boss of World 5. He shot some flies at us that barely tickle our health away, and besides that, his offensive arsenal doesn't involve much. Like Leechmonger, he's highly susceptible to fire damage and magic damage in general. I'm not sure why they decided to make his arena so gigantic. Given a more condensed space, this boss probably would have been a very tense battle, but instead we have this wooden football field. A few floor hazards like the lava and flame lurkers arena probably would have elevated the fight a bit more as well. Speaking of which, now that I look at it, the arena reminds me a lot of the fight with the Rotten in Dark Souls 2. Even though I don't think the fight is anything all that special, I do like the design of the Dirty Colossus, and also how he just sort of swings his big dumb flesh arm wildly at you if you get too close. After that boss fight and getting the eroded soul, we have what is arguably the most memorable boss fight in the game. See you next video where we check it out. Bye.